Welcome to our 3 dubs, where your favourite fanfiction stories come to life through immersive text-to-speech narration. Sit back, relax, and let the words take you on an unforgettable journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Chapter 6 Questioning. Present day. The plane landed in New York a little over an hour after the flight began. After they arrived back at HQ, Loki was ushered into the building. The criminal had a smug grin on display for the entire flight, and as Steve escorted him through the hallways, he had the same smirk on his face now. He seemed to feed off of the FBI agent's stares as Rogers placed him in the interrogation room and shackled him to the table. Steve felt a moment of relief after he shut the interrogation room door. Finally having a little space, he thought, let the asshole talk himself mute. I don't have to listen right now. But his relief was short-lived. If the plane felt overcrowded with 8 strong personalities, then the conference room was suffocating as Steve joined everyone along with Wanda and Bruce. The right to remain silent rang through Roger's head again because he could have heard a pin drop from how quiet it was. Everyone was still walking on eggshells due to the pissing contest they all were guilty of during the fight. Their hard feelings may have been exposed on the plane, but that exposure only uncovered what had been forming for years. 4 government agencies, via the proxies in the room, were about to hash out a discussion about next steps, aka what the fucking hell was going on and what were they going to do. The conference room was surrounded by glass walls that looked out into the command center. The large table accommodated all of the agents who sat at it, but it was literally split down the middle. A dividing line was almost visible with FBI agents on one side as Steve joined his team Bruce, Wanda, Bucky, and Sam, and the non-bureau employees on the other Tony, Rhodey, Thor, and Maria. Stark broke the silence by slowly tapping his pen on the table, trying to get a rise out of Steve as he watched him take his seat. He did have to wait though, because the assistant director was approaching. Fury looked through the glass windows of the room. He saw the glares and unspoken hostility between everyone. This was going to be worse than his academy days teaching them. At least then, he was working with a clean slate. Now, his current and former team knew what stubborn assholes they could all be and what buttons to push. Fury knew this was going to be anything but easy. Unfortunately, his intuition was usually right. Motherfucker, this is going to be a long day, he whispered to himself, sighing heavily as he entered the room. Placing his palms on the head of the table, Fury leaned over and looked at the ragtag group facing off in heated stares before him. Alright everyone, let us get one thing straight here. I know there is no love lost between the agencies you work for. Just like I know that there is plenty of bad blood to go around in this room. But quite frankly, I don't give a damn. His voice beat through the air like a bludgeon, and it worked to garner attention as all pairs of eyes turned to him. He continued, "Yeah, you heard me. I didn't care about any of your baggage when you all started at Quantico. I didn't care about any of your relationships or friendships when we all became a team afterwards. And I sure as hell don't care about any bullshit you've been holding on to. I care about the work getting done." The truth was that Fury did care. He cared a lot about each individual in the room. He'd been through their ups and downs with them and literally went from training them to leading them in the field. But he would also say whatever needed to be said in order to get them to focus on something else besides each other. And right now, Fury could tell his words reached at least a couple of people in the room as he spoke again. Somehow all of you found ways to set aside your differences in the past, and believe me, your differences were blatantly obvious to all of us at Quantico from the start. You worked together. You became a damn good team. Hell, you even became friends and family a long time ago. So please, for the love of God, tell your stubborn sides to shut up and throw your pride out the window. Because whether you like it or not, Loki obviously has something up his sleeve, and we're in this together. Banner, Rogers, Maria, and Thor nodded with the sentiment. Fury sat down and continued, "While you were all screaming at each other as if you were on a daytime soap opera, yeah, I heard every goddamn word from the flight. I was in contact with your bosses at the CIA, NSA, and Homeland Security. We're all in agreement. The FBI has a lead on this case, and the people in this room will make up the joint task force." Not everyone was buying the goods Fury was selling. Stark glanced at Rudy before he spoke. "As I recall, Nick, you don't usually share so well. So, forgive me if I don't fall for any of this bullshit." Bruce cut him off. "Jesus, Tony. Is it possible for you to just shut up and listen for one goddamn second? There's obviously something bigger at play here," Rhodey answered. "No shit. But in case you didn't notice, we read this CIA. Our entire work is in the area of something bigger. This escalation of egotism needed to be nipped in the bud immediately, or the flight's greatest hits were going to be on repeat all day." That is enough. Furious voice rose. Sometimes he really hated how right his intuition could be. This was going to be exactly as difficult as he thought. Tony, I do share. I am nice like that. I am sharing my conference room with you right now, and if you're polite, maybe I'll even give you a donut. So if you have a problem, take it up with your superior. But you're not going to like his answer because I literally got off the phone with him 15 minutes ago. You lost this one, so get over it. You're still on the case, but you're going to have to play by our rules. That goes for everyone here, Rhodey. Consider what I just told your partner. Thought I better not catch any NSA tech being misplaced around here trying to gather FBI information. You're here to work on the case, not on your career. Bucky snorted under his breath at the lambasting tone the other side of the table had. Wanda hit his leg under the table, telling him silently, but with her fist, "Yes, not done yet." And as for the five of you, Fury started as he directed his attention towards the FBI side of the table. Fucking do better. Didn't he train you all these years to be so easily provoked? They all knew he was right, staring at their boss. They also knew the arguments were far from over, but for right now they would have to figure out some way to work together. Steve took a breath and said, "You rewrite, Nick. Let us get started." Tony rolled his eyes, but lamented and nodded his head. Of all the individuals present, Tony and Steve were most at odds. If they both agreed to play nice right now, then so could everyone else. Fury knew this as he said, "Finally, it's about damn time. Now let us get started. Maximoff, what do we have?" Wanda ran down everything from the intel they had prior to today on Loki's activity and whereabouts. She mentioned the evidence Steve grabbed from the house, which wasn't too much as she said, "I'll need a little more time to cross-reference some analysis of different tests, but I don't really think it will show us anything. I think the evidence is all a red herring, and the real source of the information is in the interrogation room." She looked at her boss as Fury said, "Bruce, why don't you tell everyone what you told me when they were on their flight?" Banner worked mainly with medical and psychological units to help out the FBI agents before, during, and after missions. Wanda kept them alert and aware of their surroundings through her lap by being their eyes and ears. Bruce kept the team branded by keeping them in check and healthy between her eyes and ears. Bruce studied Loki a lot over the years, and if there was one thing he knew, it was Loki always kept the most important pieces of the puzzle closest to his vest. Clearing his throat, he said, "Well, it's not that it's impossible to find anything of value from data and evidence. Of course there is. It's just with Loki and with all of us. I think it is safe to say that he's hiding something. And the only way we're going to find out whatever that something is through talking to him. It is what he wants, and I know he is going to provoke everyone in here as much as possible." Bruce looked directly at Steve as he said the last part. Steve's brow crinkled as Bruce continued, "So we really need to try and become when we talk to him no matter what he tells us. Because the only way we're going to get anything real out of him is by making him think we're replaying his game. We have to give him what he wants essentially, but we also have to keep our emotions in control." Everyone had a past with Loki. Wanda, Bruce, and Natasha were actually the closest to him at the academy. Bruce and Wanda shared similar interests and started to have similar strengths while in training. That was then. This is now. And now everyone had a desire and a reason to punch his teeth in. They all knew their patience would be tested to not physically wipe the smirk off of his face. But what everyone also knew was that Bruce's statement was really only directed at one person, Steve Rogers, the individual with the most baggage in this situation. Wanda's hand squeezed her husband's thigh as they were both thinking the same thing right now. This conversation was going to turn uncomfortable very quickly. Bucky spoke. "Bruce, we get it. We need to not show our hot-headed side around him. I am probably the biggest risk since he brought up the fact that Wanda and I have a kid on the plane." God, Wanda loved him. He was deflecting the conversation, trying to get the focus off of his brother. Wanda had heard Loki's empty comment about Peter as well. Since she listened in on the flight, she swore in a creative string of expletives and actually wished her husband had throttled Loki. But as angry as the passive mention of Wanda and Bucky made both of them, they knew the person who was most vulnerable around him was actually Steve. Fury knew what Bucky was trying to do for his brother. But Fury also knew what he was doing. He wasn't trying to hurt Rogers or make him uncomfortable. Hell, Fury had come to love Steve like a son over the last 12 years. But Fury also knew that he needed a wake-up call. A call that told him to put on every layer of thick skin he owned because shit was about to hit the fan. Fury was also telling everyone through the communication of Banner that they all should fucking tread lightly when it comes to anything Loki might say. The message was received as Fury caught a glimpse of Steve clenching his jaw. Fury stopped Barnes from continuing. Stark. You wanted 15 minutes with our man of the hour, you got it. There were a couple of confused looks as he continued. Everyone is going to get their 15 minutes with Loki, but like I said before, you do it by our rules. You know, the rules you learned and promised to abide by a long time ago. Tony looked over at Steve, and for the first time since this whole thing started a couple of hours ago, he was trying to be cordial in his presence, as if he was communicating silently. Okay. I'll try. Stark nodded at his old friend and former teammate with that sentiment. It was actual progress. Steve looked up and nodded at Tony, accepting the slight step forward he was making, and said, "Furious, right. We all have a connection with Loki, so every one of us is going to need to see what we can get out of him, no matter how difficult or painful that may be." Fury said, "Okay, let us get to work." The 9 agents gathered in the observation room to watch as Fury went first. Assistant Director Fury, "Gut. Authority looks good on you." "Really, this is a much better look than babysitting a bunch of trainees at Quantico," Loki said. "Loki, you clearly think you're holding a royal flush right now. Why don't you save us both a lot of time and tell me what game you think you're replaying, and then I can have the pleasure of telling you all about your new home in jail. I think you'll find it less accommodating than the luxuries you were used to." Loki grinned. "Oh, believe me, Nicholas. You'll be the one wishing he didn't waste time when the cards were dealt." Fury spoke to him for 5 minutes before returning to the observation room. "He is not here to talk to me." "I am sure of that." "Who is next?" Banner spoke with him for about 20 minutes, trying to focus on the friendship they once shared. But Loki kept changing the subject by talking about internet medical practices replacing doctors and how Banner will feel obsolete soon, and that if he asked nicely, Loki would be happy to try and find a spot for him in his criminal network. Bruce wasn't surprised, but he was worried because his hunch of Steve being the one Loki really wanted to talk to was becoming clear as each person struck out. He returned to the room shrugging his shoulders and said, "Sorry everyone." Rhodey went next, followed by Thor and then Maria. Each of their attempts were under 10 minutes. They each came back in the room admitting they were unsuccessful. Rhodey threatened a black site on Loki. Maria threatened to pull political weight, and Thor tried to appeal to him in a straightforward manner, but he gave up nothing. Sam and Bucky had longer sessions with him, around 20 minutes each, but they had the same results as everyone else, talking in circular conversations full of antagonizing, empty statements. Stark followed Bucky. A heap of frustration followed after 10 minutes as he slammed his fist into a table when he returned. Loki had taunted him with the fact that the CIA didn't catch him before the FBI. It wasn't so much the taunting that made Stark angry. It was the fact that there were only 2 people left to speak with him and he'd given up nothing. No reason as to why it was so easy this morning to arrest him or why they were all here. Stark's intuition was twisting his stomach in knots. Something dark was at play. Wanda entered the room. Even though his back faced the door when she entered, he started speaking, letting her know that he knew it was her. "But Wanda, by my count, there is only you and the brooding lumberjack that is watching us right now left to try and squeeze a little something out of me, right?" She didn't say anything as she came around to the other side of the table to sit across from him. She was calm and collected, but extremely motivated. Yes, it was true they had been friends, so on some level she wanted to be the one to break him and make him talk. But what was driving her was trying to get to him, so Steve wouldn't have to come in here. She drummed her fingers on the metal table, staring at him. Everyone else reacted to Loki's prodding right away. Some tried a friendly, humanized approach, while others tried a more threatening path. Wanda wasn't going to do either. She just watched him tick, because he couldn't stand silence, he never could. A chink in his armor was finally exposed. He was visibly annoyed at her. Loki spoke again in a darker tone. "Well, you are certainly smarter than the pathetic excuses that have wasted my time already. Tell me, Wanda dear, how can you stand being married to a moron like Bounce? I mean, I hope your son Peter right. I hope he takes after you, otherwise I regret to inform you that he might be doomed." What Wanda wanted to do was pull his chain so tight against the table that his head slammed against the metal. What she wanted to do was punch his teeth in and make it clear that he is never to speak of her husband or son. But as she told her team a few hours ago before this all began, she spoke to herself, let cooler heads prevail. He was showing his weakness. He was unnerved by her collected appearance and was trying his damnedest to provoke her, using the low-hanging fruit of her son and husband as targets. Wanda went with her instinct and threw him a curveball. She threw everyone a curveball as she finally spoke. "You know, Loki, you do like Peter, even though he most definitely takes after James. Although, if I were being honest, he shares some characteristics with you too. He is all over the place at times and full of energy, but he is wickedly smart and naturally funny, even for as young as he is, not unlike how you were when you were a lot younger. She had caught him off guard. Loki's eyes questioned her, trying to figure out what she thought she was doing. She looked up at the camera for a second, trying to tell her husband with a glance, "Stay calm, James." His eyes narrowed. "What do you think you were doing, Wanda? You think you still know me and can break through to me? You think you can appeal to me since we used to spend time around one another?" Loki was actually angry. He had displayed anger in his mocking tone when they arrested him, but this was the first time that a flash of genuine emotion came out of him. Wanda leaned back in her chair and folded her hands gently in her lap. "Maybe it would be easier to be honest with others if you started being honest with yourself, Loki. I know there is no attempt at trying to appeal to you. I am just a woman, sitting across from a man who used to be a partner and a friend. You aren't someone who I used to spend time around the word as friend. He said, don't you dare try to pull on heartstrings that aren't there, Maximoff. I am not trying to pull on anything, Loki. I am simply stating the truth. I think it is ironic that you clearly accounted for how difficult this would be on all of us, dredging up whatever it is you replaying it, and exposing old wounds from our past. But what you failed to account for, what you've always failed to account for, is how the consequences of your actions don't just affect people you want to hurt. They affect you too. You don't know what you were talking about, he started, but she quickly cut him off. Everyone in the observation room could tell the power dynamic had shifted. Wanda clearly was tapping into something. Sam nudged Bucky. I think she might be able to actually get something out of him, Buck. He is ticked off enough that he might actually slip up. Bucky grinned back at Wilson. Yeah, I fucking love my wife. Wanda leaned forward, placing her elbows on her knees, and stared right at him. Oh, Loki, I know exactly what I am talking about. For a long time now, you've been so blinded by your misplaced hatred that you can't even recognize when someone is actually just being genuine with you. No one staring at us in that room out there has any interest in being genuine, Wanda. They want their pound of flesh. All the sarcasm was gone in his voice. They may want that, but you can't blame them for ending up on the most wanted list. You caused that. No one else. She waited a couple of seconds before continuing. It is a shame, Loki. You have always been incredibly smart. Your intelligence always kept you 3 steps ahead, and that played in your favor when you chose a life of crime. But it also kept you out of touch. It is a shame to think of what you could have done with us if you would have stayed with the team instead of selling your soul. And for what? Money, drugs, power, women and men. Now full of anger, he said, "And what do you have, Wanda?" Love? Pathetic. I have made choices. Yes, but you'd be surprised at what people will do to survive when left to the wolves. It is a kill or be killed world, and nobody gave a second thought when I was tossed out like a piece of trash. She quickly answered, "So, this whole show today is for what? To show us what you have without us. Where are all of those false idols you've built, Loki? Where is your criminal network? The problem with living in a world where everyone is out for themselves is that when it comes time to need help, you be on your own." She had struck several nerves. "Oh, you re good, my dear. So much better than I remember. You almost had me. But you know what? I think I am not going to give you those answers, Wanda. I think if any of you want any answers, you'll need to bring in your fearless brother-in-law. We done here." It was over as the metaphorical door to this conversation was slammed shut. He stopped talking, and Wanda was surprised that he ended their conversation abruptly. She had gotten further with him than anyone else, and he was visibly vulnerable right now. She waited several more minutes as Loki stayed at the table, almost staring through it, lost in thought. She hated all of this. She hated the memories it drudged up. She hated that Steve was going to go through whatever he had to in order to get Loki to talk. She hated the steep pit in her stomach. Like everyone else leaving the room felt, Wanda couldn't help think that something awful was about to happen. As Wanda stood up to leave, there was no sneer or glare or grin anymore. Loki's father was gone, and a lonely and empty man was left. A lonely man who at the moment had nothing to lose. She met Steve in the hallway and she stopped him, Steve, but he cut her off. "Wanda, don't. You did great, and you got him ready for me, really." Her eyes wrinkled at him. "No, Steve. You don't. You don't let him get to you. You know he is going to bring up Natasha." God, it had been a while since she had said her name out loud to Steve. It sounded like ice breaking, just as it did when Peter said her name early this morning by accident. "Wanda, I can handle this." She frowned at him as he squeezed her shoulder and went inside. It had been a long day already. The early morning rise and run before the AM meeting. The mission. The mess of all partners being thrown back together forcibly. The fighting and bickering in the conference room. They're trying by each agent to get Loki to talk. The afternoon had turned to early evening as Rogers went inside, and Wanda returned to the observation room saying to herself, "How can you handle this when we don't even know what this is?" 12 years ago, Steve and his group ended up going to a bar called The Dive. A couple of hours in, and the evening festivities were well underway. Stark and Loki were flaunting the fact that they both came for money from the look of their clothes to their mentions of extravagant vacations and expensive cars to them both insisting drinks were on them. Tony stood on a chair an hour ago letting every female know a round of drinks was on him. Loki followed immediately after, letting every man in the bar know that he would equal the gesture. It didn't matter at all, but Steve, Sam, and Bucky had suspected after a few weeks that Loki may be more interested in the gender of people he just bought drinks for versus who Tony did. Bruce and Thor were in a competitive game of pool. Sam and Rhodey were bonding over military stories, joking about whether the Air Force Wilson or Marines roads were tougher. "Dude, I hit 9 GS last year in a dogfight." "Beat that," Sam said. "All that's cute, Sam. You know we love it when you boys in the air can fly a little fast. It gets us where we need to go faster to do the real work on the ground you are." Rhodey answered. Steve and Bucky laughed at their jeering as Bucky said, "So typical." The flash of the Air Force and the arrogance of the Marines fighting it out, as Steve added, "All while the Army actually does all the work." They clinked their glasses and started laughing. Sam and Rhodey overheard them and joined the brothers. Keeping the joking lay, Bucky added, "Hey, we all good here. At least none of us are in the Coast Guard." But the men all laughed at the rubbing. Before they knew it, their laughter was directed at Tony striking out at his attempt to pick up line on a woman he had just given a drink to. Tony came over and joked. Something must have been wrong with her hearing or vision. Steve answered, "You know, Tony, if you actually treated the women you were hitting on with respect, maybe they'd talk to you." Bucky smacked Tony on the shoulders. "Don't you listen to my brother Stark. Yes, an idiot." Loki, Thor, and Bruce had joined the conversation at the same time and started laughing as Steve rolled his eyes. Bucky finished, "Watch and learn, boys." They watched and they learned that if Steve was an idiot, then Bucky was a moron. Within 30 seconds, a drink was spilled on him, followed by a slap to the face, as the brunette he had clearly pissed off created distance from him. He shrugged his shoulders, clearly unaffected, as he returned to the group as Thor said, "Why do I fear that is not your first encounter with a drink or a hand to the face by a beautiful woman?" Steve raised his beer and said, "Thor, you were more perceptive than people gave you credit for. If I had a nickel for every time I've seen Buck get smacked." "Yeah, and if I had $1 for every time a woman I am pissing on asked me about my brother instead of me, we'd be buying the drinks tonight instead of Stark and Loki," Bucky said. Steve rolled his eyes, but Tony quickly added, "Yeah, Barnes, what the hell is that all about? I've heard 2 women tonight ask me who my friend with the great arms and blue eyes is. Maybe we should all look like a lost puppy dog messing his sidekick." Bucky grinned at Steve as Sam added, "Or at least seem as disinterested in the ladies here as Rogers. And maybe we'll all end up with someone tonight." Steve's face turned a light shade of red as he took another drink of his beer and rolled his eyes. The truth was that Natasha had been right. Several women had tried to come up and talk to Steve at the bar, but he deflected and tried to point them in the direction of his friends. That was before they had pretty much pissed off each female in the bar, even with Tony's free round of drinks. "Whatever, guys," but Bucky quickly cut him off. "Steve, you asked for all of this, you know. I mean, it's pretty obvious that you can't even look at another girl here without thinking of your lady in red." Everyone was laughing and having a great time as Bucky, Sam, and Tony all patted him on the back, telling him they were just giving him a hard time. They stayed in the bar for another half hour before Sam said, "We should join up with the ladies. If we're not going to get laid tonight, we might as well have a good time with everyone." For the first time, people started giving Sam a hard time tonight instead of Steve. Tony said, "I am sure you would have a good time, Sam, with Maria. I've seen the way you look at her." "Whatever," Sam said as Steve cut him off. "Don't come running to me for help. Sam, I've put up with this shit all night." Loki spoke next. "Yes, right though. Wanda just texted and said they were going to a bar called The Man next. It's only a little ways from here." Everyone agreed as Bucky asked, "Wait, Loki, why are you and Wanda texting?" Bucky knew that Loki and Wanda had grown close as friends over the last month. They both had more of a draw towards the technological and academic side of the academy. He also suspected with his roommates that Loki wasn't necessarily interested in women in that way, but he couldn't help feel a tinge of envy. Bucky had been trying to get Wanda's number since day one, and she shot down each of his efforts, almost in the same manner as the brunette just shot him down with her hand. Loki answered, "Oh, Barnes, your brother isn't he the only one who looks like a lost puppy now?" Sam added, "Thank God, the attention is off me for a while," as they all left the bar to meet up with Wanda, Maria, and Natasha. Wanda kept texting Loki to see where the guys were, as she was waiting outside for them when they arrived at the mile. She yelled and jumped up and down when she saw them. She gave them each a big hug as the men grinned at her elation, clearly showing she had more than a few drinks tonight. "You'll never guess how many shots Maria and I did," she said. Bucky held on tight when she had hugged him last. She didn't even realize it was him until he spoke. "Wondered, I am afraid to know the answer to that. How drunk are you?" She squirmed out of his arms. "Oh, shut up, James, I am a big girl, and I know how to handle my liquor," she hiccuped, and his brow furrowed at her. She looked up at him and narrowed her eyes at his face. "James, why is your cheek red? It looks like something hit you." The rest of the men burst out in a roar of laughter as Bree said, "She is clearly sober enough to pick up on that minor detail, Barnes." She winked at him and escorted them all into the bar. Wanda took them over to a corner where Maria was sitting. She stood up to give a couple of the guys a high five and yelled, "Hey guys, come to join the real party?" They all joined in the fun immediately as Sam and Tony went to get a round of drinks, and Bucky licked his wounds from another rejection from Wanda. A deck of cards was already being dealt by Rhodey to whoever wanted to join in, and Thor and Banner went back to another game of pool, arguing over who was the strongest billiards player. Steve noticed instantly that Natasha wasn't teed by Maria. He started scanning the bar to see where she was. He started to feel nervous as he continued to look when he heard Marie say she stepped outside Rogers. She said she'd be back in a few minutes. Something about fresh air. Steve left the bar immediately to go back outside and look for her. Honestly, he had a great time at the previous bar with the guys. It was good for all of them to have this time to relax and let loose. But what he was really looking forward to was being around Natasha again. Steve didn't notice her by the front entrance, and he couldn't see her anywhere in the parking lot. He chewed on the inside of his lip as he felt like calling her name. Maybe he misheard Maria, and Natasha wasn't actually out here. If only he had misheard. Two voices caught his attention just as he was about to go back into the bar. He stopped and cocked his head to the side and noticed there was an alley to his right. From where he stood, Steve couldn't decipher anything besides the muffled sounds and inflections of two individuals talking, intermixed with the beats of the jukebox and laughter coming from the bar. It was more than curiosity that caused him to turn to his right instead of open the door to the bar. Something instinctually was telling him to move towards the alley. He moved about 40 feet and started to recognize differences. One of the voices was clearly Natasha's. He could recognize her sultry and low tone anywhere. Again, he wanted to yell out her name and run to her because a small part of him was happy to hear her. Another small part of him was concerned because he started thinking, what if someone followed her outside? Those thoughts were fleeting because there was no sign of struggle or worry in her voice. Instinct took over again, and his nerves were suddenly on high alert, sounding all the alarms inside of him. He stepped a little closer, so he was right at the corner, and he could distinctly hear that the other voice came from a man. Steve didn't recognize him, and he immediately thought of his conversation with Bucky in their room earlier as doubt started to creep in his mind. He peered around the corner and confirmed it was Natasha with another man. The man was a little taller than Natasha, had brown hair, and was in a dark jacket and pants. They stood close to one another as Steve listened to them. Natasha said, "What did you want me to do? We haven't been able to get off campus before tonight." The man answered, "You should have found a way. That is what you were told before you started this." Natasha became defensive and said, "Hey, where's the trust? I have earned this, Clint. You need to have my fucking back like you always have." Silence filled the air for several seconds as the man named Clint groaned. "What's the deal with the guy, Tasha?" Steve felt his stomach twist into knots. Sam's comment about Natasha being a master of deflection, Bucky's concerns, and all of Steve's questions that were unanswered played in his mind as he heard Natasha answer, "You're being absurd, you know that, Clint. This is about you, me, and trust. You either trust me or you don't." Clint huffed and quickly spoke back to her, cut the crap. "I know you, Natasha, and I know that part of you has always wanted out. But you should know better than anyone that we don't get what we want in this life." Steve could feel a pounding starting in his head as he clenched his fists. He honestly wasn't processing what the words actually meant right now. All he knew was that everything he thought since day one with her suddenly felt tainted. Natasha grabbed the other man's hands as she said, "Clint, look, you can always trust me. You know that. But please, you have to let me get through the FBI training." He sighed at her words and looked at her with affection before he said, "I just miss you." Steve felt like he was kicked in the stomach as his throat went dry when he heard Natasha answer, "I miss you too." He saw them hug for a few seconds and nod at each other. Then he watched the man disappear down the alley. He was out of sight, but definitely not out of mind. He continued to watch Natasha compose herself as she wiped a tear from her cheek. Steve's mind was racing. Confusion, jealousy, anger blocked out everything else at the moment. He didn't know what would happen if he walked in the alleyway at that exact moment, and he felt like the ground beneath him was shifting. No, he needed to avoid her at the moment. He needed to sit. He needed a strong fucking drink. Steve finally opened his fist as he went back into the bar and felt the numbness fade as feeling returned to his fingers. Questions pounded through his brain. What is going on? Who was that man? Why were they fucking touching? And most importantly, the same question rang through his head a month into knowing her, or so he thought. He had asked it when she ran out of the coffee shop. He had asked it after day one of their training when he realized Natasha Romanoff was in the FBI training program with him. And he was asking it now in a loud and demanding yell to himself, who the hell is Natasha Romanoff? He sat at the bar, ordered 2 shots of whiskey from the bartender, and he downed both of them quickly to take the edge off his thoughts. Bucky watched this scene unfold in front of him. He saw Steve leave the bar 5 minutes earlier. He watched Steve storm back inside just now, obviously pissed off. When his brother was angry, he didn't hide it particularly well. He saw Steve throw himself onto a stool at the corner of the bar and down 2 shots, which was totally unlike him. Bucky's head cocked toward the entrance again as he watched Natasha come back in without any emotion showing on her face. Bucky wasn't going to interfere. Steve was a big boy and could figure this situation out on his own. He had voiced his concerns to his brother earlier, and if Steve asked, Bucky would be first in line to help. But if Bucky was being honest with himself, he was getting a kick out of the dramatic scene playing out in front of him. He sat back in his chair and watched as Romanoff looked over to where Maria, wonder, and she was sitting before. Surprise flashed in her eyes when she saw the men there. And then concern. Apparently, Wanda and Maria had the idea of contacting the men while Natasha was outside, because Romanoff appeared to be completely clueless as to why they were there. Natasha looked right past Bucky as he stared at her as she scanned through the group, clearly looking for Steve. Now, his amusement shifted. He was officially curious as he quirked his eyebrow. He stood and went over to Natasha. Yes, not over here. He just came in from outside. He was looking for you. She looked at him with what he thought was concern again. But if Bucky was completely sober, he would have noticed a little worry go through her eyes at that same moment. He narrowed his eyes at her. But she didn't even register the fact he was trying to figure out why she was acting aloof or why they could possibly be fighting. She started scanning the bar and found Steve's hunched shoulders as the bartender delivered him another drink. Bucky leaned in and spoke. You two must be having a lovely quarrel because it takes a lot to make my brother drink liquor like a fish. Finally, Bucky watched as Natasha shoved past him, muttering shit as she approached Steve at the bar. Again, if Bucky were completely sober, maybe he would have been curious enough to figure out what sort of drama was about to unfold. But he wasn't sober. His buzz was more than setting in, and he wanted to get back to the group and to Wanda. So he shrugged the whole thing off, telling the rest of the group his brother and Romanoff were just horny and needed to do something about it soon. Natasha moved towards Steve. She was anxious inside, but outside she forced a look of resolve and coolness. She was going to approach this situation with the hope that maybe he was over here by himself because Tony said something to piss him off. She grazed his right shoulder with her hand and whispered in his ear, Hey there, soldier, want to buy me a drink? From the initial make-out sessions to the boxing together to the occasional hand-holding or brushing against each other's skin, it always felt magnetic when they came in contact with each other. Like they just fit and wanted more. Now, for the first time, she felt Steve's body tense from her touch and not in a good way. It reminded her of how a dog's tail goes rigid when it sees something threatening. That was the word to describe Steve right now, rigid. That resolve she was trying to display was officially wearing thin as her anxiety rose. Joking was off the table. She sat down on the stool next to him at the corner of the bar. He was looking down at his scotch which apparently he had ordered in addition to the empty shot glasses next to him. She reached over and placed her hand on his forearm. Hey, he retreated from her touch like she was burning him. Now Natasha was the one to feel knots in her stomach. He finally looked up and their eyes met. Apparently, sincerity was off the table too. His stare, more like a glare right now, caused her to shift on her stool as the worry and anxiety started to morph into a panic feeling inside of her. Natasha tried to speak again. Steve, let us get out of here. It was a plea, and so unlike her, but she was in uncharted waters with him right now. She leaned in close enough that Steve could smell the mixture of her perfume, shampoo, and everything else that was her as his nostrils flared. I am not going anywhere with you, Natasha. Why don't you go find Clint? Her stomach dropped and she flinched. The blue in his eyes always gave her a warm feeling over the last month. Now his icy stare just made her feel cold. Pleading more, she said, "Steve, please. Please let us get out of here, and I'll explain everything that you think you might have seen or heard outside." Steve shook his head and let out a lengthy breath through both his mouth and nose, trying to calm himself. The next thing she heard was Steve speaking in a low tone, staring at his glass of scotch. "I don't think I saw anything, Natasha. I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. And what I heard was a woman who I've spent every waking minute with over the last month sound like a complete stranger. What I heard was you talking to a man I've never seen before, and it was clear you have a history with him." He looked up at her again and saw her eyes shift at his tone as he finished. "The only thing I apparently don't knows you." The bartender brought over 2 more shots, and he downed them both. Now she was getting angry. She didn't know what he had heard, just that it had caused him to be jealous, or angry, or everything else. And while she knew she deserved the projected feelings coming from him, her fiery spirit reared its head. She wasn't going to sit her and watch him get sloshed beyond comprehension. She fought the battle between their eyes and reached across him in frustration. Her chest brushed his arm as she grabbed his full drink and emptied it in her mouth in one single gulp. Natasha winced as the liquid burned in her throat. She sat back again as she felt a warmth crawl up her spine to her face. Steve let out a sarcastic laugh at her little display. "I thought you liked vodka, not scotch." "Oh, was that another lie?" Right or wrong, the stubbornness in both of them had been fueled by the events of the evening, by their words and stares, and by the alcohol. She rolled her eyes at him. "I don't like scotch, but you clearly aren't going to share. Plus, I needed to get your attention." Steve clenched his jaw. "I am out of here, Natasha. Have fun with whoever you like, I don't care." He stood up, and she quickly moved in front of him, blocking his path to the door. Natasha put her hands on his stomach and arm and said, "Goddamn it, Rogers. You do too care." She paused and looked up at him. "Steve, whatever you're rethinking, you have to let me explain." Steve batted away her hands and looked down at her. The anger quickly faded, and now all she could see was hurt behind the blue. "You rewrite, Natasha. I do care. I care that you lied to me again." Steve started walking past her, but he paused for a second and added in a defeated but sincere tone, "Good night, and be safe." Then he walked out the door. Natasha felt a burning in her eyes. She knew he was mad at her, but he still had to be so fucking good on top of it all. All of the anger that came from him a few minutes ago had been sucked out of his voice when he told her to be safe. Like, no matter how hurt he was, he still cared that she was okay. Goddamn, it was right. She wanted to cry, but she fought it. She was upset at herself for being so stupid to not realize the men were joining up with them tonight. She was upset at herself that Steve had overheard something outside. She was upset at Steve for being stubborn, righteous, attractive, honest, and good. She was upset at everything. He blew into her life a month ago unexpectedly, and he'd just walked out of it right now. But she was stubborn and determined to make him listen as she said to herself, "No way, Rogers," as she exited the bar and chased after him. Bucky caught the entire Romanoff and Rogers show as they both stormed out of the bar and thought drunkenly to himself, "Those two are going to spontaneously combust if they don't do something now. I don't want to hear about you looking at any other girls tonight. You're going to get a lot of attention with how your arms look in that shirt." Feeling flushed, Steve heard Bucky cough loudly and start groan, "Good God." Wanda finally came over to link her arm in Natasha's. She smiled at Steve and said, "Okay, kids, time to detox and peel away for the night. Our cab is here and the fare is ticking." Wanda and Maria waved their hands at Natasha, faking an attempt at cooling her off while Steve was met with a chorus of rezzing from the men. They smiled one more time at each other as they went off in separate cabs for the evening. Thanks for listening to our 3 dubs. A huge thank you to 80s Kat for creating this incredible story. Be sure to check out their work for more amazing content. And special thanks to NC for providing the background footage that brought this narration to life. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Until next time, happy listening and keep imagining.